A single discovery can shatter everything we know about ancient history. This is the story of 26 archaeological finds that do not fit the established timeline, forcing a complete redrawing of human prehistory. By the end of this journey, you will see our past not as a straight line of progress, but as a tapestry filled with forgotten chapters and profound mysteries. We will explore a temple complex so old it rewrites the story of civilization itself, and an ancient device so advanced its technology would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. How much of our history is still waiting to be uncovered? For over a century, archaeologists have carefully constructed a grand story of our past. This established timeline is a narrative of gradual ascent, a clear path from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, and eventually to the builders of cities. According to this model, the pivotal moment was the Neolithic Revolution, which began around 10,000 years before the Common Era. This was when humanity learned to cultivate plants and domesticate animals, laying the foundation for everything that followed. The first great civilizations, like those in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, are then shown emerging around 5,000 years ago, around 3000 BCE. They are presented as the sole cradles of human innovation, the bright dawn of writing, monarchy, and monumental architecture. This framework is logical, elegant, and taught in textbooks worldwide. It represents the cumulative work of generations of scholars piecing together a puzzle from the fragments they had. But what happens when you find a puzzle piece that simply does not fit? The entire picture, no matter how well constructed, begins to tremble. This is not about disproving history, but about discovering that it is far richer and more mysterious than we ever believed. The real story begins not with the walls we have built, but with the first cracks that appeared in their foundations. Standing among the massive, T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe is a humbling experience for anyone who knows the traditional story of human history. These stones tower over a person, arranged in great circles and etched with elaborate carvings of foxes, cranes, and scorpions. The sheer scale is breathtaking, but the true shock is the date. This entire complex was deliberately buried around 10,000 years ago, its construction stretching back to approximately 9,600 years before the Common Era. That is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and a full 5,000 years before the first cities of Mesopotamia even appeared. According to the established timeline, the people who built this should have been simple hunter-gatherers, nomadic bands focused solely on survival. They should not have possessed the organization, the manpower, or the artistic vision to quarry, transport, and erect 20-ton pillars of stone. This is not a crude arrangement of rocks. This is architecture planned and executed with precision. The site is a cathedral on a hill, a testament to a shared belief system and a level of social cooperation that textbooks claimed was impossible for that era. The archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who led excavations here, argued that Göbekli Tepe turns our understanding on its head. It suggests that the urge to create monumental structures, to gather for ritual purposes, and to express complex ideas through art may have actually preceded agriculture. Perhaps it was the need to sustain the large groups of people gathering at such a sacred site that actually spurred the first experiments with cultivating crops. This idea flips the entire narrative of the Neolithic Revolution. What if civilization did not begin with farming and then lead to religion and art? What if it was the other way around? The existence of Göbekli Tepe forces a profound and unsettling question. If these so-called primitive people could achieve this, what else about their society, their knowledge, and their capabilities have we grossly underestimated? This is not merely an anomaly, it is a direct challenge to the very foundations of our prehistoric timeline. From a temple that predates history itself, we journey to a device that defies it. In 1901, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera were caught in a storm. Seeking shelter, they stumbled upon an ancient Roman shipwreck. Among the statues and artifacts they recovered was what appeared to be a mere lump of corroded bronze and wood, so encrusted it was almost overlooked. Decades later, when archaeologists finally cleaned and examined it, they realized it was not a lump at all. It was a fragmented, intricate clockwork device, a bewildering assembly of precisely cut bronze gears housed in a wooden case. They called it the Antikythera Mechanism. Scientific analysis dates it to the 2nd century before the Common Era. This was the Hellenistic period, the age of Archimedes, a time we associate with brilliant philosophy and early mathematics, but not with precision engineering of this staggering complexity. The device is in essence the world's oldest known analog computer. Its system of at least 30 interlocking gears was used to calculate the positions of the sun, the moon, and the planets. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses and even model the irregular orbit of the moon. The craftsmanship is so refined, the mathematical principles so advanced, that nothing remotely comparable would appear again until the sophisticated astronomical clocks of 14th century Europe. That is a gap of over 1,500 years. How does such advanced technology simply appear in the historical record, only to vanish without a trace for more than a millennium? The existence of the Antikythera mechanism implies a lost tradition of mechanical engineering and astronomical observation. It suggests that pockets of high science existed in the ancient world, knowledge that was perhaps concentrated in small, brilliant schools or workshops, and then lost to the fires of war, the decay of time, or the sheer fragility of such complex artifacts. This was not a toy for a wealthy noble. It was a sophisticated scientific instrument, a product of a mind that saw the cosmos as a machine that could be understood and replicated. Its very presence forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. If this one device survived by pure chance at the bottom of the sea, how many other marvels of ancient technology have turned to dust, leaving no evidence behind? Deep within the basement of the National Museum of Iraq rests a simple clay pot. It looks unremarkable, something you might pass by without a second glance. But inside this jar, dated to the Parthian era between 250 years before the Common Era and 250 years after, lies a puzzle that has sparked fierce debate for generations. The jar contains a copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt, and within that cylinder sits an iron rod. To the archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who studied it after its discovery in 1936, the assembly looked eerily familiar. It bore all the components of a simple galvanic cell, a basic battery. When filled with an acidic or alkaline liquid, like vinegar or grape juice, this artifact could have produced a small but measurable electric current. The implications are as shocking as the spark it might have generated. This object, if it truly is what it appears to be, would mean that a form of electrochemistry was understood roughly 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in the 19th century. What could such a device have been used for? The theories are as fascinating as they are varied. Some suggest it was for electroplating, perhaps to deposit a thin layer of gold or silver onto other objects, a process we thought was invented much later. Others propose a more mystical purpose, that the subtle current was used in religious rituals to create a tingling sensation, a literal shock of the divine for worshippers. There is even speculation about its use in ancient medical therapies, where a mild electric charge was applied to soothe pain. the true purpose may never be known for certain, and many scholars remain skeptical, arguing it was merely a storage scroll container. But the very possibility of the Baghdad Battery forces a profound question about the linear path of invention. We are taught that technology progresses in a straight line from simple to complex. Yet here is an artifact that suggests a branch of knowledge, a practical application of a natural force that appears, is used, and then vanishes from the historical record for centuries. It stands as a quiet, potent symbol in a museum basement, a reminder that our timeline of discovery might be missing entire chapters of experimentation and ingenuity. What other simple yet brilliant technologies have been lost because they were made of materials that decayed, or because the knowledge was held by a select few who took their secrets to the grave? Sometimes the most baffling mysteries are found not in grand temples but in the palm of your hand. In the winter of 1961, 3 men were rock hunting near Olancha, California, searching for geodes. They cracked open what seemed to be a promising nodule, expecting to find a crystalline cavity within. Instead, they discovered an object that looked utterly alien to its ancient setting. Inside the hard, weathered shell was a cylinder of solid, porcelain-like material, with a metal core and what appeared to be a rusted copper sheath surrounding it. To anyone familiar with 20th century mechanics, it looked unmistakably like a spark plug. The problem was the rock itself. Initial geological analysis suggested the concretion, the hard mineral layer that had formed around the object, could be as much as 500,000 years old. This was the birth of the legend of the Coso artifact. If authentic, this single find would not just bend our timeline, it would pulverize it, placing a piece of modern industrial technology deep in the Pleistocene epoch, a time when early humans were only just beginning to use simple stone tools. The debate that erupted was fierce and perfectly captures the conflict between mainstream archaeology and the allure of alternative history. Skeptics soon presented a compelling counterargument. They identified the object as a champion spark plug from the 1920s, a type commonly used in Model T Fords. They explained that the hard nodule was not a 500,000-year-old geode, but a much more recent iron concretion. These concretions form relatively quickly when a metal object is left in mineral-rich water, causing rust and other minerals to cement around it, creating a hard, rock-like shell that can appear deceptively ancient. For mainstream science, the case was closed, a classic example of misidentification. Yet, for others, questions lingered. The initial X-rays of the object showed a mysterious, spring-like component that did not match any known spark plug design. The official champion explanation, while plausible, was never definitively proven, as the original artifact was lost, preventing modern reanalysis. This is the core of the dilemma the Coso artifact presents. It forces us to confront 2 equally important principles. On one hand, it underscores the absolute necessity of rigorous verification, of applying Occam's razor, which suggests the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. We must be wary of our own desire for the spectacular, a desire that can sometimes lead us to see miracles where there are only mundane mistakes. On the other hand, it serves as a cautionary tale against dismissing anomalies too quickly, of allowing a prevailing theory to become so rigid that it shuts down all further inquiry. How do we, as explorers of the past, learn to distinguish between a genuine historical paradox and a simple modern misinterpretation? The skill to tell the difference becomes our most essential tool as we venture deeper into the shadows of prehistory. The line between a world-shaking discovery and an elaborate deception can be razor-thin. In the 1960s, a Peruvian physician named Javier Cabrera Darquea was presented with a strange stone gifted to him by a local farmer. The stone was made of andesite, a dense, gray volcanic rock, and its surface was meticulously engraved with a picture that should not exist. It depicted a human figure riding on the back of a triceratops, a creature that vanished from the earth tens of millions of years before the first humans walked the planet. This was the first of what would become known as the Ica Stones, a collection that eventually grew to number in the tens of thousands. The scenes carved into these dark, heavy stones are a catalogue of the impossible. They show our ancient ancestors interacting with stegosauruses and pterodactyls as if they were common livestock. Other stones depict medical procedures that look like heart transplants and cesarean sections, performed with startling precision. Some even show people gazing at the heavens through what appears to be a sophisticated telescope, mapping constellations we thought were only understood in the modern era. If these artifacts were genuine, they would not just rewrite history, they would completely reinvent it, suggesting a lost epoch of human civilization that possessed advanced knowledge and lived alongside dinosaurs. The allure of such a narrative is powerful, tapping directly into a deep, almost primal desire for a past that is more magnificent and mysterious than the one we have been taught. Yet, the scientific establishment did not embrace the stones. Instead, it launched a rigorous investigation, and the story began to crumble. The farmer who provided the initial stones eventually confessed, admitting he and his family had carved the images themselves using dental tools and then artificially aged the stones by baking them in cow dung. He claimed he produced the hoax because the doctor paid well for them, creating a market that fueled the creation of more and more fakes. For most archaeologists, this confession closed the case. The Ica stones were a fraud, a lesson in how easily wishful thinking can be exploited. But why do these stones continue to fascinate us, even after being exposed as a hoax? They represent a profound cultural tension. They are a direct challenge not to a specific date or artifact, but to the entire methodology of mainstream science. They force us to ask who gets to decide what is real. What is the burden of proof for an earth-shattering claim? The story of the Ica stones is a masterclass in the ethics of archaeology. It demonstrates the critical importance of provenance, the documented history of an object from the moment it is unearthed. Without a clear and verified provenance, any artifact, no matter how compelling, remains suspect. This case teaches a dual lesson. On one hand, we must cultivate a healthy, rigorous skepticism, a shield against our own desires to believe in the fantastic. We must demand evidence that can withstand the harshest scrutiny. On the other hand, we must also be cautious of a skepticism so rigid that it becomes a closed door. The process of investigation itself, the act of debunking, is a vital part of the scientific mission. It is through this very process that we strengthen our understanding and refine our methods. The Ica stones, in their elaborate falsehood, ultimately serve to make the genuine, verified anomalies we have already explored all the more significant. They remind us that the real mysteries of our past are wondrous enough without needing to invent them. The delicate art of distinguishing a genuine paradox from a clever fake becomes even more difficult when the object in question seems utterly ordinary. In 1936, a couple walking along a creek near London, Texas, made a discovery that would become a cornerstone of alternative archaeology. They found a curious piece of rock with what appeared to be a wooden hammer handle protruding from it. When they cracked the rock open, they revealed a complete iron hammerhead, seamlessly encased within the stone. The geological formation where it was found is part of the Cretaceous period, dating the rock itself to well over 100 million years old. This single fact creates an impossible contradiction. According to everything we know, humans capable of forging metal tools did not exist when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. the hammer, now known as the London hammer, should not be there. Scientific analysis of the hammerhead only deepened the mystery. The iron was found to be of exceptional purity, with a very low carbon content and an unusual lack of the slag inclusions that are typical of iron produced in 19th century furnaces. This is not the crude work of a blacksmith from a recent pioneer settlement. Its composition suggests a metallurgical technique that was either lost to time or far ahead of its presumed era. How could such a refined piece of metalwork become sealed inside a rock that formed in an age before mammals even dominated the planet? Skeptics propose a more conventional explanation. They argue that the hammer is a genuine tool from a much more recent period, perhaps from the 1800s, that simply became encased in a hard, rock-like concretion. Minerals dissolved in water can precipitate around an object, binding with rust from the iron and organic decay from the wood to form a shell that looks and feels like solid stone. This process, while slower than fossilization, can occur over centuries, not millennia, creating a convincing illusion of great age. The wooden handle, which seems miraculously preserved, could have been chemically altered by the minerals, giving it a petrified appearance. This is the scientific consensus, a classic case of misinterpretation of natural processes. Yet, for those who study the artifact, questions persist. The specific type of concretion is rare, and the perfect encapsulation of the entire tool remains a geological oddity. The purity of the iron continues to intrigue metallurgists, as it does not perfectly match known 19th century production methods. The London hammer, therefore, stands at a crossroads. It is either a powerful testament to the strange and deceptive power of natural chemistry, creating an perfect archaeological fake without any human intent, or it is a silent, stubborn relic pointing to a profound gap in our understanding. It forces us to confront the limits of our own perception. Are we looking at a modern tool in a deceivingly ancient jacket, or are we looking at evidence of a forgotten chapter in human, or perhaps even non-human, history? The hammer does not give up its secrets easily, and its enigma lies not in its complexity, but in its stark, simple impossibility. High in the harsh, windswept peaks of the Baigong Pipes Mountains, straddling the remote border between China and Tibet, a different kind of mystery was reportedly uncovered in 1938. An archaeological expedition led by a Chinese professor is said to have entered a network of long-sealed caves. Inside, they did not find the expected artifacts of ancient nomadic tribes. Instead, they discovered rows of neat, orderly graves containing the skeletal remains of beings that were not quite human. The skeletons were described as small and fragile, with unusually large, elongated skulls. Scattered nearby, arranged with deliberate care, were hundreds of strange stone discs, each about 9 inches across with a perfect hole in the center. These are the legendary Dropa stones. The discs themselves were estimated to be 12,000 years old, a date that places them deep in the Paleolithic era. But the true controversy lies not in their age, but in what was supposedly found etched onto their surfaces. A spiral groove, finer than a human hair, winds from the center of each disc to its outer edge. Upon closer inspection, this groove is said to be composed of a continuous stream of tiny, unknown hieroglyphic characters, a script so minute it required magnification to be read. The story claims that when this microscopic text was finally deciphered, it revealed a breathtaking narrative. It told of a group of beings, the Dropa, whose spacecraft crashed in the inhospitable mountains long ago. Stranded and unable to repair their vessel, these visitors from the stars sought refuge in the caves, eventually interacting with the local tribes and leaving behind this record of their tragic journey. This is the core of the Dropa stone's enigma, a tale that catapults past conventional historical puzzles and directly into the realm of the ancient astronaut hypothesis. For mainstream academia, the story is a textbook example of a modern myth. No reputable institution has ever held or studied these stones. The original Chinese professor has never been conclusively identified, and the sensational claims first appeared in a German magazine article, not a scientific publication. The unusual skeletons are widely interpreted by scientists as the remains of now extinct primates, or as human remains distorted by the natural processes of burial and time. The entire narrative is considered by most archaeologists to be an elaborate hoax, a classic case of misidentification amplified by a compelling science fiction story. Yet, why does this particular story, so thoroughly dismissed by experts, continue to resonate with such power decades later? The enduring appeal of the Dropa stones speaks to a deeper human impulse, a desire to look at the most isolated and unexplained corners of our world and wonder if we are truly alone. It forces us to confront the very limits of our explanatory frameworks. When faced with a story that so completely defies conventional understanding, we are pushed to a precipice. Do we dismiss it entirely to preserve our existing model of the past, or do we allow it to expand our sense of the possible, however slightly? The stones, whether real or not, serve as a cultural mirror. They reflect our timeless fascination with the idea that our planet's history might be intertwined with forces from beyond our world. They remind us that some mysteries persist not necessarily because they are true, but because they ask a question we are not yet ready to stop asking. What if the greatest story of our past is still waiting to be written in the stars? A map should not contain knowledge of a world its maker could not possibly know. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map, drawing upon a multitude of source charts, some of which he noted were from the time of Alexander the Great. The resulting document is a breathtaking artifact, a patchwork of known and unknown that has baffled historians for generations. It accurately charts the western bulge of Africa and the eastern coast of Brazil with a precision that was rare for its era. But its most staggering feature lies at the very bottom. The map depicts a landmass stretching from the southern tip of South America, a coastline that aligns almost perfectly with the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica. This is the geographical heart of the mystery. Antarctica was not officially sighted by European explorers until 1820, over 300 years after this map was drawn. The existence of this land on the Piri Reis map is puzzling enough, but the detail that defies all logic is its portrayal. The coastline is shown not as a frozen, glacial shelf, but as a land free of ice, complete with rivers, mountains, and what appear to be flowing waterways. Modern seismic surveys have revealed the true topography of Antarctica beneath its miles-thick ice cap, and the shape on the Piri Reis map bears an uncanny resemblance to that buried coastline. For this to be possible, the source maps used by Piri Reis would have to originate from a time when Antarctica was last ice-free, a period geologists place at least 6,000 years ago, and more likely as far back as 12,000 years before the present. This single piece of parchment suggests a radical revision of our entire prehistoric narrative. It implies that a sophisticated, seafaring civilization existed in the deep past, a culture with the ships and the navigational skill to chart a global expedition, mapping continents with an accuracy that would not be matched again until the 20th century. Who were these ancient mariners? Was there a forgotten epoch of exploration, a network of knowledge that spanned the globe, only to be lost to rising seas or some other cataclysm? The map itself is a ghost, an echo of that lost world preserved by an admiral who likely had no idea of the true age or significance of the charts he was copying. It stands as a silent, profound challenge to the supposed isolation of ancient cultures. How could such detailed geographical intelligence simply vanish from human memory for thousands of years, only to resurface in the hands of a 16th century Ottoman scholar? The Piri Reis map does not give us answers, but it poses a question we can no longer ignore. High in the thin air of the Peruvian Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán presents a puzzle carved in stone on an almost unimaginable scale. Its walls are composed of colossal limestone blocks, some towering over a person and weighing more than 100 tons. These are not rough-hewn rocks piled haphazardly together. Each block is a unique, irregular polygon, with complex angles and curves that interlock with its neighbors so perfectly that the joints have withstood centuries of earthquakes. The fit is so exact that, even today, you cannot slip a razor blade or even a single piece of paper between the stones. This is not simple masonry. It is a colossal, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle executed with a degree of precision that would be challenging to replicate even with our most advanced computer-guided machinery. The official historical narrative attributes this masterpiece to the Inca Empire, constructed around the 15th century of the Common Era. But this attribution comes with a profound and unsettling question. How did a culture that lacked the wheel, that had no knowledge of iron or steel tools, and that had not developed a written system for complex planning, achieve such a feat of engineering? The sheer logistics are staggering. Quarrying these behemoths from distant sites, transporting them up steep mountain slopes without draft animals or carts, and then lifting and lowering them into place with such hair's breadth accuracy, seems to defy the very tools and technologies we know the Inca possessed. The construction technique itself is a mystery that rivals the purpose of the site. The interlocking shapes suggest an understanding of seismic activity, creating walls that sway with the Earth's movements rather than cracking apart. This is knowledge gained from deep experience, a level of architectural genius that appears to have sprung forth fully formed. The perfection of Sacsayhuamán's walls leads to a compelling and controversial theory. Perhaps the Incas did not invent this sublime stonemasonry, but instead inherited it. They may have found the Cyclopean foundations already in place, the work of a far older, highly advanced civilization whose name and history have been utterly lost to time. The Incas themselves claimed that the megalithic structures were built by a race of giants or gods in a distant, mythical era. What if their legends were not mere myth, but a faded cultural memory of the true builders? This site does not just challenge the timeline of Andean technology. It suggests that the roots of such sophisticated engineering may reach back into a prehistory so deep we have yet to find its beginning. The silence of Easter Island is a presence all its own, broken only by the wind and the stoic gaze of the Moai. These colossal stone heads, some standing over 30 feet tall and weighing 80 tons, are more than just statues. They are a profound logistical riddle carved from volcanic rock. Each one was quarried from the slopes of the Raraku volcano, then transported for miles across rugged terrain to massive ceremonial platforms called ahu. According to the established narrative, Polynesian settlers reached this, the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, around 1,200 years after the Common Era. In just a few centuries, this small population is said to have carved nearly 1,000 of these giants, moving them into position without the use of the wheel, draft animals, or even metal tools. The sheer scale of this endeavor seems to defy the logic of their isolation. How could a community that numbered, at its peak, only in the low thousands muster the surplus labor, the resources, and the specialized engineering knowledge required for such a monumental project? The conventional explanation involves teams of people rocking the statues forward on log rollers or sliding them on greased wooden sledges. Yet, these theories remain just that, theories, and the practical challenges of moving an 80-ton block of stone for miles without breaking it are almost incomprehensible. This logistical nightmare hints at a society far more complex and organized than we typically attribute to a remote island population. It suggests a powerful, centralized authority and a deep, shared cultural purpose that drove them to reshape their entire landscape. But was this society truly born in a vacuum? Intriguing clues point to a more complicated past. Some researchers highlight genetic evidence of pre-Polynesian sweet potato in the Americas and linguistic oddities that could suggest fleeting contact with South American peoples long before the accepted timeline. The famous Kon-Tiki expedition demonstrated that such oceanic voyages were possible with ancient technology. Perhaps Easter Island was not a closed laboratory for societal development, but a waypoint in a vast, forgotten network of Pacific exploration. The Moai do not just stand as monuments to a lost people. They stand as silent judges, forcing us to question whether the map of the ancient world was far more connected and far more mysterious than the empty spaces on a chart would have us believe. Beneath the clear, blue waters off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island lies a site that seems to defy the very sea that conceals it. A massive, monolithic structure emerges from the ocean floor, a sprawling complex of stone terraces, sharp 90-degree angles, and towering pillars. Its most striking features are two colossal, parallel platforms that look like giant steps, and a trench so straight and narrow it appears carved by a purposeful hand. This is the Yonaguni Monument, a sprawling enigma submerged since the end of the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago. The debate surrounding it is a perfect storm of geology versus archaeology. On one side, many geologists argue this is a spectacular example of natural sandstone fracturing. They point to the powerful seismic activity in the region, explaining how the rock's natural bedding planes can fracture along straight lines, creating the illusion of carved surfaces and staircases. The ocean currents, they say, have simply eroded the stone into these dramatic, but entirely natural forms. Yet, when you look at the sheer scale and the sheer number of seemingly artificial features clustered in one place, the natural explanation begins to feel, for many, incomplete. There is a triangular rock formation that looks uncannily like a crude face. There are what appear to be wide, ceremonial processional roads and perfectly circular holes that seem drilled for a purpose. The most compelling argument for a human origin is the presence of two round holes, each about 2 feet deep, side by side on a rock ledge. For a geologist to explain these as the product of random erosion stretches credibility. They look for all the world like foundation holes made to hold massive stone pillars in place. If even one of these features is confirmed as man-made, the implications are staggering. It would mean that a prehistoric culture, flourishing over 10,000 years ago, possessed not only the maritime skill to navigate these waters, but also the sophisticated engineering knowledge to quarry and shape stone on a monumental scale. This was a time when, according to our textbooks, humanity was just emerging from the shadow of the Ice Age, living as hunter-gatherers. The Yonaguni Monument suggests a different story, one of coastal societies that built their cities and temples on what was then dry land, on the vast continental shelves exposed when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. As the world warmed and the glaciers melted, the oceans rose, swallowing these coastal plains and everything on them. The monument could be a lone sentinel, a ghostly remnant of an entire civilization that was lost beneath the waves, its achievements and history erased by the rising tide. This single, sunken structure forces us to confront a haunting possibility. How much of our own prehistory is not buried in the earth, but lies submerged on the ocean floor, waiting for us to rediscover it? Etched into the stark, sun-baked plains of southern Peru, the Nazca lines present an art gallery on a scale so vast it defies human sight from the ground. These are not small carvings or simple mounds. They are gigantic geoglyphs, colossal images scraped into the dark desert pavement to reveal the lighter earth beneath. From the surface, you might see a long, straight path or a confusing trench, but from the vantage point of the sky, the true masterpieces are revealed. A hummingbird with wings outstretched spans over 300 feet. A spider, perfectly proportioned, reaches 150 feet in length. A monkey with an elaborately curled tail, a killer whale, a tree, and endless geometric shapes, including spirals and trapezoids that stretch for miles across the plateau. These creations are attributed to the Nazca culture, who created them between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, and this is the heart of the paradox. The Nazca people had no means of flight, no balloons, no gliders, certainly no aircraft. They meticulously designed and executed these immense works of art, investing immense communal effort over generations for a view they themselves could never witness. Why would a culture create such monumental art that is fundamentally invisible to them? One leading theory is that the lines were a form of communication with the gods. The figures were not meant for human eyes but for deities residing in the sky above. The act of walking the lines, of maintaining them, could have been a powerful form of ritual procession, a way of marking the landscape as sacred territory. The precision of the designs, which remain stunningly intact in the dry climate, suggests an advanced understanding of geometry and surveying, perhaps using simple stakes and ropes to plot out the enormous shapes. Yet the sheer scale and accuracy still baffle engineers. How did they ensure the proportions of a 300-foot condor were perfect without ever checking their work from above? This leads to a more controversial suggestion. Could the Nazca have had access to some form of primitive balloon technology, a secret lost to time that allowed them a fleeting aerial view? Or, as some proponents of alternative history argue, does the existence of the lines imply that someone with the ability to fly, perhaps a vastly different and unknown civilization, provided the perspective? The most profound explanation may be the simplest, and yet the most challenging to our modern mindset. The Nazca world view was likely not bound by our strict division between the practical and the spiritual. For them, creating a giant spider visible only to the sky gods was not a pointless act, but the most logical and powerful thing to do. It was an act of faith made permanent on the landscape, a prayer etched into the very earth. The lines force us to abandon our own assumptions about art and utility. They challenge us to understand that ancient peoples operated with a different kind of logic, one where the invisible world was just as real as the visible one, and where the greatest works were often dedicated not to humanity, but to the powers they believed watched from above. Deep within the jungles of Costa Rica, another enigma of stone awaits, scattered across the Diquis Delta, as if left behind by forgotten giants, are hundreds of colossal stone spheres. These are not roughly shaped boulders. They are monuments of pure geometry, carved with such precision that many are nearly perfect spheres, some measuring over 6 feet in diameter and weighing several tons. They were crafted by the Diquis culture, beginning around 600 years after the Common Era, a time when Europe was deep in its so-called Dark Ages. The creation of these objects is a puzzle in itself. How did a society using stone tools achieve such flawless symmetry and smoothness? The process would have required immense patience and a sophisticated, almost intuitive, grasp of three-dimensional geometry. Artisans likely started with a large block of granodiorite, a hard, volcanic rock, and used a combination of heating with fire, controlled cooling with water, and relentless pecking and grinding with other stones to slowly coax the sphere from within. This was not a crude act of carving, but a patient, ritualistic act of revelation, uncovering a perfect form hidden inside a rough one. But why? What drove this culture to invest such an astronomical amount of collective labor into creating these silent, geometric sentinels? The theories are as varied as the spheres themselves. Some archaeologists propose they were astronomical markers, arranged to point to celestial events or to chart the solstices. Others believe they were symbols of power and status, placed near the homes of chiefs to denote authority and cosmic alignment. Their arrangement in large, geometric patterns on the ground suggests they could have been territorial markers, mapping out social or sacred landscapes in a language of circles and lines we can no longer read. The true purpose may forever remain a mystery, as the spheres were often moved from their original positions by later settlers, scrambling any potential astronomical or social code they once held. Their very perfection is what makes them so anomalous. This was not a practical technology for survival. It was an expression of abstract thought, a dedication to an idea of perfection that served a cultural or spiritual need far beyond the utilitarian. The stone spheres of Costa Rica force us to expand our view of pre-Columbian societies. They remind us that sophistication is not always measured in metalwork or written language. It can be found in the quiet, profound patience required to create a perfect sphere from an unyielding stone, a testament to a mind that saw the universe not as a chaotic wilderness, but as a place where perfect forms could and should be made real. A book exists that holds its secrets tighter than any vault. Since its discovery in an Italian monastery in 1912, the Voynich Manuscript has been the holy grail of cryptographic puzzles, a code that has broken every expert who has tried to crack it. This is not a simple scroll or a single page. It is a full 240-page book, written entirely in a script that has never been seen anywhere else in the world. The characters flow in a looping, unknown alphabet, a language that bears no resemblance to any known writing system, but the text is only half the mystery. The pages are filled with illustrations that are both detailed and deeply strange. There are plants that do not correspond to any known species, their leaves and roots twisted into impossible biological forms. There are intricate astronomical charts showing constellations no one can identify, and circular diagrams populated by tiny, naked female figures bathing in or connected by a system of what looks like plumbing. One section even depicts cellular structures, as if viewed through a microscope, centuries before such an instrument was invented. Scientific testing has confirmed the manuscript's parchment dates to the early 15th century, placing it firmly in the medieval world. Yet its contents feel utterly alien to that time. For over a century, the world's top codebreakers, including teams from both world wars who successfully cracked complex military ciphers, have thrown every analytical tool at their disposal at the Voynich. They have tested for known languages, complex substitution ciphers, and even steganography, where the true message is hidden within an innocent-looking text. Every single attempt has ended in failure. The statistical patterns of the writing do not match any known human language, yet they are too structured and complex to be random nonsense. This leaves only a handful of deeply unsettling possibilities. Perhaps it is an incredibly sophisticated hoax, a medieval forgery created to deceive a wealthy patron. But the amount of labor involved in creating hundreds of pages of consistent, unique script and detailed, bizarre art for a single scam seems almost as far-fetched as the alternative. Maybe it is a genuine text written in a cipher of such brilliant complexity that it has defied modern computing power. Or, most intriguingly, perhaps it represents a completely different system of knowledge, a way of classifying the natural world and the cosmos that is so alien to our own scientific mindset that we literally lack the framework to understand it. The Voynich Manuscript is a humbling artifact. It sits in a university library, completely accessible, yet utterly closed off. It whispers from the not-so-distant past of entire realms of thought, of schools of philosophy or natural science that have vanished without a trace. It forces us to confront a simple, profound question. How many other books written in languages we can no longer read have turned to dust, taking their secrets with them forever? The sheer scale of human ambition is written in stone across the countryside of Brittany, France. Here, the Carnac alignments present a landscape deliberately rearranged by a force we can scarcely comprehend. Row upon row of prehistoric standing stones march across the land in eerily straight lines, over 3,000 of them, stretching for miles like a petrified army frozen in time. This is not a single monument, but a coordinated project of almost unimaginable scope, erected around 4,500 years before the Common Era. To stand before these megaliths is to feel the presence of a society that defies our simplest labels. These were not the simple, scattered farmers of Neolithic Europe we often picture. The organization required to plan, quarry, transport, and erect this many stones speaks of a powerful, shared vision and a social structure capable of marshalling labor on a colossal scale for generations. The purpose behind this immense effort remains one of Europe's oldest mysteries. Were these stones a giant astronomical calendar, their rows precisely aligned with the solstice sun or the cycles of the moon? Could they have been a sacred processional pathway, a place of ritual where the boundary between the earth and the spirit world was believed to be thin? Or were they a stark territorial marker, a statement of power and control over the land, visible for miles around? Each theory carries weight, yet the true answer is lost to us. What is undeniable is the cognitive leap this represents. The builders of Carnac were not merely surviving, they were imposing a complex geometric order onto the natural world. They were thinking in terms of vast distances and collective purpose, planning a project that would outlive them by millennia. This single site shatters the narrative of early Europe as a quiet backwater. It reveals a culture with the cohesion and the will to literally move mountains, or at least thousands of tons of stone, transforming their entire environment into a testament to their belief system. The silent, enduring stones of Carnac force a profound question. What kind of world did these people inhabit that demanded such a permanent, monumental response? The desolate silence of the Algerian Sahara holds a secret painted on stone. At Tassili en Najer, a vast sandstone plateau scarred by erosion, the rock walls serve as a gallery documenting a world that has vanished entirely. These are not simple sketches. They are a vibrant, detailed chronicle of a green Sahara, a time when rivers flowed and great herds roamed. The images are breathtakingly clear, depicting elephants, giraffes, hippos, and crocodiles, creatures that could not survive a single day in the current, hyper-arid desert. This art, created from as early as 6,000 years before the Common Era, is a stark record of catastrophic climate change, showing a landscape that was transformed over millennia from a savanna teeming with life to the barren sea of sand we see today. But among these familiar animals are figures that are anything but familiar. Scattered throughout the panels are the so-called round head paintings. These humanoid forms are large, often towering over the more realistic scenes of daily life. Their most striking feature is their complete lack of facial detail, replaced by a smooth, perfectly circular head, sometimes with what appears to be a single, central eye. Their bodies are often depicted in postures that seem to float or hover, and some are adorned with strange, non-functional patterns and lines. They look less like hunters or shamans and more like visitors from another world, their forms echoing modern depictions of astronauts in bulky suits. Interpreting these figures is a profound challenge. The easy, sensational explanation is to see them as literal ancient astronauts, beings from the stars visiting a primitive Earth. But this ignores the complex inner world of the artists themselves. It is far more likely that these round-headed giants represent something deeply symbolic within their own culture. They could be gods or spirits, depictions of beings from a mythological dreamtime, or perhaps even shamanic visions. The artists may have been trying to render the form of a consciousness leaving the body, a spiritual entity that had no need for a human face. The true anomaly of Tassili is not that it proves the existence of extraterrestrials, but that it proves the existence of a sophisticated and complex human imagination at a time we consider remote and simple. These paintings force us to confront a fundamental question about prehistory. How do we distinguish between a literal record of events and a symbolic expression of a people's spiritual reality? The round head figures stand as a permanent reminder that the ancient mind was capable of abstract, surreal thought, of concepts that we, with our modern, empirical worldview, may have lost the vocabulary to understand. The debate over what lies beneath the surface of a site can be just as revealing as the stones we can see. In Indonesia, the rolling hills of Gunung Padang are crowned with ancient terraces and columns of volcanic rock, a site long considered a 2,000-year-old megalithic complex. But what if this visible structure is merely the tip of something far grander and infinitely older? Controversial research using geoelectric surveys and seismic tomography suggests the hill itself is not a natural formation. The data points to a massive, layered, pyramid-like construction, with chambers and hollow spaces extending hundreds of feet into the earth. The most staggering claim is the age of its deepest layers. Core samples and analysis hint that the initial construction could date back more than 20,000 years to the peak of the last ice age. If these findings are ever fully validated, Gunung Padang would not just be the oldest pyramid in the world, it would be the oldest known megalithic structure on the planet by an almost unimaginable margin, predating the Egyptian pyramids by more than 12,000 years. This claim has ignited a firestorm in the archaeological community. Traditionalists point to the lack of definitive excavation at such depths, arguing that the geological data is being misinterpreted and that the site's true age is much younger. They champion the slow, careful method of stratigraphic digging, where each layer is meticulously recorded and its artifacts catalogued. The proponents of the older timeline, however, argue that new technologies allow us to peer into the earth without destructive digging, revealing a history we never knew to look for. This clash is about more than just one hill in Indonesia. It is a fundamental debate about how we uncover the past. Are we to trust only what we can physically touch and brush clean, or do we embrace the ghostly images rendered by radar and electrical currents? The friction at Gunung Padang exemplifies a pivotal moment in archaeology, where the very tools of investigation are evolving faster than our established timelines can accommodate. The hill stands as a silent challenge, its deepest secret still buried, forcing us to wonder if our current understanding of the ancient world is built on a foundation we have only just begun to scratch. High on the desolate slopes of Mount Baigong in China, a mountain face holds openings that should not be there. 3 triangular shafts, eerily symmetrical, are carved directly into the rock, leading into shallow caves. Inside these caverns, and running from them down into the brackish water of a nearby saltwater lake, is a network of rust-encrusted iron pipes. They come in a variety of diameters, some as narrow as a toothpick and others wider than a human leg, all fused stubbornly into the stone. They are ancient, reported to be of an unknown age, and they form a stark, metallic anachronism in a region so remote and inhospitable that it has never supported any known human settlement. This is not a place where one expects to find industry of any kind. The very presence of these pipes feels like a deliberate installation, a piece of complex plumbing abandoned in the wilderness millennia ago. Who built this and for what possible purpose? The most straightforward explanation offered by some geologists is a fascinating natural process. They propose that these are not pipes at all, but the fossilized casts of ancient tree roots. In this scenario, trees that grew millions of years ago left behind hollow spaces in the sediment as their roots decayed. Over immense stretches of time, these hollows were filled with iron-rich minerals carried by groundwater, slowly solidifying into the pipe-like forms we see today. The subsequent uplift of the Tibetan plateau then exposed these mineralized casts, making them look like a manufactured network. This is a compelling and entirely plausible geological story, a testament to nature's ability to mimic human artistry. Yet the placement of the pipes gives one pause. Their connection from the mountain face directly into the lake suggests a deliberate flow, a system designed to move water from one point to another. The triangular openings feel like architectural intent, not random erosion. This pushes us to the very edge of our understanding, forcing a difficult choice. Do we accept the intricate, if rare, natural explanation? Or do we dare to consider that this remote mountainside might be the skeleton of an ancient, unknown industrial site, a facility constructed by a culture whose technological footprint has otherwise completely vanished? The Baigong Pipes do not offer an easy answer. Instead, they stand as a rusted, stubborn question, challenging us to define the boundary between a geological wonder and the ghost of a prehistoric machine. Beneath the familiar landscapes of Europe lies a hidden world, a subterranean network of tunnels that winds its way from the Scottish Highlands to the Anatolian Plateau. These are the Erdstall tunnels, narrow, man-made passages just wide enough for a single person to crawl through, and they date back more than 12,000 years. Their discovery beneath dozens of Neolithic settlements presents a puzzle that is as much about human connection as it is about engineering. These are not natural caves, but carefully engineered structures with smooth walls, sharp angles, and built-in air shafts, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of underground construction. The sheer effort involved is staggering to consider. Using only stone tools and fire, generation after generation of our Stone Age ancestors excavated this labyrinth, moving countless tons of earth and rock. But for what purpose? They are too cramped for habitation, too extensive and uniform to be simple root cellars, and they show no signs of everyday use. This was not a project born from practical necessity. Instead, the tunnels seem to point toward a shared spiritual impulse, a common belief so powerful it compelled communities across an entire continent to dig in unison. The very uniformity of these tunnels, found in regions with vastly different languages and customs, suggests a deep, underlying cultural connection that transcended local identities. This was not a Europe of isolated, primitive tribes, but a continent knitted together by a shared vision of the world below. What profound ritual or belief could have inspired such a monumental, coordinated effort? The tunnels remain silent, but their existence speaks volumes, forcing us to redraw our mental map of prehistoric Europe from a collection of scattered dots to a vast, interconnected web, united by a common purpose we can only begin to fathom. Buried alongside the bones of an ancient mastodon, a metallic object confounds every expectation. In 1974, construction workers on the banks of the Mureș River in Romania unearthed bones that were unmistakably prehistoric. But nestled among them, over 30 feet deep in a layer of sediment, was something that did not belong. It was a wedge-shaped object, heavily weathered and covered in a thick patina. Laboratory analysis revealed it was composed of a complex alloy, primarily aluminum, with traces of 11 other metals. This is the Aiud Artifact, and its existence creates a paradox that cuts to the heart of our technological timeline. The mastodon bones suggest an age of at least 11,000 years, a time when humanity was living in the Stone Age. Yet, the artifact is made of a refined aluminum alloy, a material that requires an industrial process known as electrolysis to produce. Humanity did not achieve this feat until the 1820s, when the element was first isolated. So how does a sophisticated, factory-made metal end up buried deep in the earth alongside creatures from the Pleistocene epoch? The immediate and most common skeptical explanation is that the artifact is a piece of a modern excavator or drilling tool, perhaps a tooth from a bucket that broke off and became mixed with the ancient bones during the very construction work that uncovered it. This is a perfectly logical conclusion, a classic case of stratigraphic contamination. Yet, those who studied the object point to the thick, hard layer of oxide that coated it, a patina they argue would take more than a century to form, suggesting it lay in the ground for a far longer time. The context of its discovery, deep within a sealed geological layer, is what keeps the mystery burning. If it is not a modern intrusion, then the Aiud artifact forces us to consider possibilities that defy conventional history. Could it be evidence of a lost civilization that possessed a technology we would not rediscover for millennia? Does it suggest a bizarre instance of time travel, or even contact with an advanced non-human intelligence? While these ideas seem pulled from science fiction, the artifact itself is a tangible, physical object. It represents the ultimate anachronism, a silent, metallic scream from the depths of prehistory that tells us our material record is far from complete. It challenges our most basic assumption that technological progress is a one-way street, moving always from simple to complex. What if that path is not a straight line, but a circle, or a branch that was long ago cut down and forgotten? The story of our past is not only written in stone and metal, but also carved into the very earth beneath our feet. In the heart of Turkey's otherworldly Cappadocia region, the Derinkuyu underground city is a labyrinthine marvel that descends over 250 feet into the soft volcanic rock. This is not a simple cave system or a cluster of hiding places. It is a veritable subterranean metropolis, a complex of 18 excavated levels that could shelter up to 20,000 people for extended periods. Imagine an entire city's population vanishing from the surface, disappearing into a hidden world complete with living quarters, stables for livestock, intricate ventilation shafts that reached fresh air, churches for worship, wine and oil presses, and even communal kitchens. The scale of this engineering project is almost beyond comprehension. While mainstream archaeology attributes its initial carving to the Phrygian people around the 8th to 7th centuries before the Common Era, the sheer depth and sophistication of Derinkuyu whisper of a much older genesis. The Phrygians may have been not the original architects, but merely the inheritors and expanders of a refuge that began with the Hittites, or perhaps even a culture lost to time. The very existence of such an elaborate and deep sanctuary speaks to a society that faced a perpetual existential threat, a danger so profound that the only logical response was to move an entire civilization underground. The planning required for this is staggering. This was not a project for a single lifetime. It was a generational endeavor, a master plan passed down from parents to children, a testament to a collective will to survive that transcended centuries. The ventilation shafts alone, which ensured a steady supply of fresh air to the deepest chambers, reveal an advanced understanding of physics and airflow that rivals modern engineering. Derinkuyu forces us to reconsider the narrative of ancient Anatolia. Our history books often focus on the empires that rose and fell on the surface, the palaces and temples bathed in sunlight. But Derinkuyu reveals a hidden, parallel history thriving in the darkness below. It challenges the very definition of a city and a civilization, suggesting that some of the most profound chapters of human organization and resilience were written not under the open sky, but deep within the protective embrace of the earth. What other dimensions of ancient life remain hidden, not in lost cities, but in the vast, unexplored networks beneath the ones we already know? The sheer silence surrounding the Longyu grottos is as profound as the space they occupy. In 1992, farmers draining ponds in China's Zhejiang province revealed a site that defied explanation, not one, but 24 colossal hand-carved caverns hidden beneath the water. Stepping inside is like entering a subterranean cathedral, a vast underground world spanning an almost unbelievable 30,000 square meters. Every surface, from the soaring ceilings to the immense supporting pillars and smooth, sloping walls, is covered in a uniform pattern of precise chisel marks, a testament to a relentless, organized workforce. The geometry is intentional, the angles sharp and consistent, ruling out any natural cave formation. This was a project of deliberate, breathtaking ambition. The math alone is staggering. To create this complex, an estimated 900,000 cubic meters of solid sandstone had to be painstakingly quarried, chiseled, and removed. That is a volume of rock equivalent to excavating the Great Pyramid of Giza, not once, but multiple times over. This was not the work of a small village or a single generation. This required the coordinated labor of thousands, sustained for decades, perhaps even centuries. They possessed a master plan and the logistical genius to execute it with unwavering precision across an enormous area. Yet for this Herculean effort, there is a deafening historical silence. These grottos are dated to at least 2,000 years ago, a time corresponding with the Qin and Han dynasties, periods famously well documented by court historians. How could a project of such monumental scale, consuming such immense resources and manpower, simply escape any mention in the imperial records? It is an omission that feels impossible. This silence points to a potentially lost chapter, a separate strand of Chinese history that operated outside the official narrative of emperors and dynasties. What was so important, so secret, or so sacred that it demanded this colossal effort, only to be completely erased from the written record? The purpose of the chambers remains a mystery. They were clearly not tombs, as no burials or grave goods were found. They show no signs of habitation, no soot from cooking fires or debris of daily life. Some theorize they were imperial quarries, but the intricate, decorative chiseling on every inch of the interior makes no sense for a mere mining operation. Others suggest a hidden military garrison, a secret refuge, or a vast ritual space for a forgotten religion. The grottos stand as a paradox, a monument to a civilization's incredible capability and a mystery to its own identity. They force us to ask what other foundational projects, what other testaments to forgotten kingdoms lie hidden in plain sight, waiting only for the water to recede to reveal their impossible scale. The silence of the Indus Valley holds a different kind of mystery, one of perfect order and chilling abandonment. In what is now Pakistan, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro rise from the plains, a city that should not have existed in 2,500 years before the Common Era. Its layout is not a chaotic jumble of ancient streets, but a master-planned metropolis. The streets run in a precise grid pattern, with entire blocks dedicated to specific functions, all constructed from standardized, kiln-fired bricks of a uniform ratio. This level of municipal foresight is staggering, but it is what lies beneath the streets that truly defies belief. The city was built atop a sophisticated, city-wide water management system, a network of drains and channels that serviced individual homes with fresh water and carried waste away. This was not a feature reserved for the elite. It was a public utility for the entire population, a concept of urban sanitation that would not be seen again on such a scale until the height of the Roman Empire, over 2,000 years later. The anomaly of Mohenjo-Daro is not simply its advanced nature, but its sudden, inexplicable appearance in the archaeological record. There is no evidence of a slow, evolutionary climb from a simple village to this urban masterpiece. We do not find the layers of a smaller, cruder settlement beneath its foundations. It appears fully formed, as if the blueprint for the perfect city was dropped from the sky and executed with flawless precision. This complete lack of a developmental phase challenges the very core of how we believe complex societies emerge. It suggests a terrifying possibility that the brilliant architects of Mohenjo-Daro were not inventing their urban model from scratch, but were perhaps implementing a pre-existing template, a system of city planning perfected by a culture that has since vanished without a trace. Who provided the blueprint? Was there a lost civilization, an earlier experiment in urban living, whose ruins now lie submerged on the continental shelf or buried beneath millennia of silt? The city offers no answers, only its silent, orderly streets, a ghost of a golden age that arrived without warning and departed just as mysteriously. Those walls are more than a defensive barrier, they are a masterclass in stone. The interlocking puzzle of Sacsayhuamán is not simply about blocks that fit together, it is about blocks that move together. The stones are carved with a series of complex, multi-angled protrusions and corresponding recesses, a three-dimensional jigsaw where every piece is unique. They lock into one another with a kind of organic precision, creating a structure that is flexible, not rigid. This is the secret to its endurance. When an earthquake strikes, the entire wall is designed to sway and settle as a single, unified mass, the stones dancing in place rather than cracking apart. This is seismic engineering of the highest order, an understanding of physics that seems to belong to our era, not to a culture without the wheel or iron tools. So how was this achieved? The conventional explanation of stone hammers and patient abrasion struggles to account for the perfection of these intricate, compound angles. The mathematical knowledge required to visualize and then execute such a design is immense. It suggests a long period of experimentation, a school of stonemasonry that had perfected its art over centuries. Yet we find no evidence of that developmental phase. This perfection appears suddenly, fully formed. This leads to a compelling and controversial thought. Perhaps the Inca were not the inventors of this sublime technique, but its inheritors. They may have found the Cyclopean foundations already in place, the work of a far older culture whose name is lost to history, a people who had mastered the art of making stone behave like a living, breathing entity. The walls of Sacsayhuamán stand not just as a fortress, but as a silent testament to a building science so advanced we can barely comprehend the methods behind it, a technology carved in stone that challenges our entire timeline of engineering. A different kind of mystery is unfolding today in the small town of Visoko, Bosnia. Here, a cluster of smooth, symmetrical hills is at the center of a modern archaeological firestorm. A controversial theory proposes that these are not hills at all, but the largest and oldest pyramids on Earth, constructed by a lost civilization over 12,000 years ago. Proponents point to the precise geometric alignment of the so-called Pyramid of the Sun with the cardinal directions, and claim to have discovered man-made concrete blocks and a vast network of underground tunnels beneath the structures. If true, this would not just rewrite history, it would shatter it, pushing complex monumental architecture back into the depths of the Ice Age. Yet, the response from mainstream archaeology has been swift and nearly unanimous dismissal. Geologists argue that the hills are entirely natural formations, a common product of tectonic folding and erosion, and that the supposed concrete is merely a type of natural conglomerate rock. The tunnels, they say, are likely medieval mines or natural fissures. This clash is not happening in dusty journals, but in the full glare of the modern media, fueled by a powerful public desire for a past that is grander and more mysterious than the one in our textbooks. The Bosnian pyramid controversy is an anomaly of our own time, a case study in the intense friction between established institutions and alternative researchers. It raises profound questions that go far beyond the hills of Visoko. Who has the authority to interpret our shared past? What kind of evidence is deemed legitimate, and who gets to make that call? For every expert who dismisses the findings, there is a team of volunteers and independent researchers claiming their work is being ignored by a closed-minded academic elite. This conflict reveals the deep emotional and cultural stakes involved in rewriting prehistory. It shows us that our timeline is not just a collection of facts, but a story that is constantly being negotiated, a story where the very rules of the debate are part of the mystery itself. The truth of the Bosnian pyramids may remain uncertain, but the controversy surrounding them is a powerful reminder that the search for our origins is as much about the future of discovery as it is about the past. Far out in the Mediterranean Sea, on the small, sun-scorched islands of Malta, stand the silent remains of a culture that achieved the impossible. The Jiwith, Above, Gantaja, and Haga Kim temples are not just piles of rock. They are the world's oldest free-standing stone structures, their foundations laid over 1,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza was even a concept. Their massive, curved facades and internal chambers with corbelled roofs represent an architectural revolution that seemingly came from nowhere. These people carved, transported, and erected limestone blocks weighing tens of tons, creating spaces that feel both ancient and eerily advanced. Yet, the stones themselves are only half the story. The true genius of the Maltese temples is written in the light. During the summer solstice, the sun's rays pierce through a carefully aligned aperture in the main temple at Haga Kim, projecting a beam of light that travels across the interior, illuminating a specific stone altar. This is not a lucky accident, it is deliberate, repeatable engineering. These structures are colossal astronomical calendars, built by a people who had mapped the cycles of the sun with stunning accuracy. How did a small, isolated island community, with no evidence of contact with larger continental powers, develop such sophisticated architectural and astronomical knowledge entirely on its own? Their achievement shatters the conventional model that places the cradle of civilization solely in the great river valleys of Egypt and Mesopotamia. It suggests that the human drive to comprehend the cosmos, to build monuments in alignment with its rhythms, is a fundamental impulse, one that can ignite independently in the most unexpected places. The Maltese temples stand as a powerful testament to a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity, proving that the desire to reach for the stars is as old as civilization itself. These scattered clues begin to form a constellation when you step back and view them as a whole. The true weight of these 26 anomalies is not in their individual strangeness, but in the startlingly consistent patterns they reveal across continents and millennia. A shared, advanced knowledge of the stars appears again and again, from the astronomical alignments of the Maltese temples to the celestial computer of the Antikythera Mechanism and the skyward-facing art of the Nazca. This is not a series of coincidences but a recurring theme, a thread of sophisticated cosmic observation woven through different epochs. Then there is the stonework, that impossible perfection seen in the interlocking blocks of Sacsayhuamán, the flawless spheres of Costa Rica, and the deep-time enigma of Gunung Padang. Each of these sites showcases a mastery over stone that seems to leapfrog over the known technological progression of their eras, pointing to a lost school of engineering, a forgotten method of shaping the very earth. Perhaps the most profound pattern is the suggestion of a connected world. The Piri Reis map hints at ancient mariners charting a globe we thought was unknown, while the Erdstall tunnels whisper of a shared spiritual impulse across a continent, and the mystery of Easter Island hints at voyages across vast oceans. These are not the marks of isolated cultures, but echoes of a world that may have been far more intertwined than our history books allow. This collective evidence points toward a singular, breathtaking possibility, that of a precursor civilization. Imagine a sophisticated culture, or perhaps a network of cultures that flourished during the last ice age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. They built their cities on coastal plains that are now submerged beneath the waves. Then, as the world warmed, the glaciers melted and the oceans rose in a series of cataclysmic floods, swallowing their world and erasing nearly all trace of their existence. The survivors, scattered and struggling, would have carried only fragments of the old knowledge, seeds of astronomy, engineering, and myth that would slowly take root again in the new world, giving rise to the civilizations we recognize today. This cyclical model of history, of rise and fall and slow rebirth, is what these 26 timelines that do not add up are ultimately telling us. Our past may not be a straight line of progress, but a story of forgotten peaks, profound loss, and a resilience that allowed the embers of a golden age to be kindled once more. Our journey through these 26 discoveries reveals a past that refuses to be contained by a simple timeline. The evidence does not point to a slow, steady climb from primitivism to civilization, but to a history punctuated by brilliant flashes of sophistication, profound losses, and long-forgotten chapters. The consistent pattern emerging from Göbekli Tepe to the Maltese temples is one of advanced astronomical knowledge, impossible engineering, and a worldview that connected distant cultures long before our histories say it was possible. The key takeaway is not that we have uncovered all the answers, but that we must cultivate a humble openness to the evidence, however inconvenient it may be to our established stories. As the philosopher George Santayana warned, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Perhaps the greatest danger is that we have forgotten a far more significant portion of our past than we ever imagined, losing not just events, but entire epochs of human capability and ingenuity. The real adventure is just beginning. We encourage you to continue this exploration, to question the narratives you have been taught, and to share which of these profound anomalies resonates most deeply with you. Let the conversation continue below, and subscribe for more journeys into the deepest mysteries of our world.